biblical tales. God floods the earth, sparing Noah, his family, and 2 of every animal on board his ark.
Now, an international team of researchers have found new evidence that a famous formation in Turkey could be the site of the ancient vessel.
For decades, people have been climbing a mountain in Turkey, staring at this giant boat-shaped formation like, wait a minute, why does that thing look suspiciously boat-shaped? And apparently, the mystery only got more, well, mysterious from there. Researchers started bringing in radar scans, soil tests, and ground-penetrating tech, claiming they may have found evidence of an ancient man-made structure buried under the mud. Meanwhile, scientists are over here side-eyeing the whole thing like, please, be serious. But the believers? Oh, they are locked in. And honestly, once you see the photos and hear the claims, you'll understand why this story refuses to die. Let's rewind to 1959. Because this whole mystery started when a Turkish military cartographer named İlhan Durupınar was reviewing NATO aerial survey photos and spotted something very weird in eastern Turkey, a massive boat-shaped outline pressed into a hillside. The formation was so distinctive that the site was eventually named after him. Now, there's also a popular version of the story involving a shepherd discovering the formation after earthquakes and heavy rain exposed it from the mud. That story gets repeated a lot. But the documented origin of the site entering the scientific record starts with Durupınar and those aerial photographs. The formation sits near the village of Uzungili, about 30 kilometers south of Mount Ararat, which immediately got people excited because Genesis names Ararat as the resting place of Noah's Ark. And honestly, the shape does not help calm the rumors down. From above, it genuinely looks like a giant ship buried in the mountain, complete with a pointed bow and tapered stern. The site measures somewhere between 515 and 538 feet long, depending on the study. That's interesting because the Bible describes Noah's Ark as 300 cubits long, which converts to roughly the same range depending on the cubit used. Scientists mostly looked at the formation and went, cool rock. Geologists argued it was a natural rock fold shaped by tectonic pressure, landslides, and erosion over thousands of years. But believers were not convinced, and they definitely did not stop digging around. So if this formation has been known since the late 1950s, and scientists already called it a natural rock structure, what exactly brought all these researchers crawling back to this mountain with ground-penetrating radar in the 2020s? What changed? The new investigations, radar, soil, and very suspicious hallways. Now this is where the story goes from interesting mountain to full-on History Channel at 2 a.m. Starting around 2019, researchers connected to the Noah's Ark Scans project, an independent research group working alongside Turkish academic partners, including reported collaboration with Ara İbrahim Chechen University, returned to the Durupınar site with technology that simply did not exist back in the 1960s and 70s. And they did not come with flashlights and vibes. They brought ground-penetrating radar, electrical resistivity scans, LiDAR imaging, and chemical soil testing. Basically, the kind of equipment used in legitimate archaeological surveys around the world. And according to the team, the results got weird fast. At the center of the claims is independent researcher Andrew Jones, who has been extremely direct about what he thinks they found. Not maybe, not possibly. This man has been out here talking like he thinks they're standing on top of the discovery of the century. According to Jones, the ground-penetrating radar data revealed what appears to be a massive internal corridor running down the middle of the formation, stretching roughly 234 feet long. The scans also allegedly showed additional side corridors feeding into a larger central open space that Jones describes as an atrium. Yes, an atrium. Inside what might be a buried ancient vessel sitting on a Turkish mountainside. The team also reported angular features extending about 20 feet below the surface. And that detail matters because natural rock formations usually do not produce clean right angles. At least, not commonly enough for people to stay calm about it. Jones argues the layout looks organized, intentional, and constructed rather than geological. In his view, the corridor system, the central chamber, and the geometric patterns all point towards something built by human hands. And then things got even more biblical. Researchers claim the The scans suggest 3 distinct internal layers within the formation. Their interpretation? Possible deck levels, which immediately sent Ark believers into orbit because Genesis describes Noah's Ark as having 3 decks. Now listen, coincidences absolutely happen. Human beings also love connecting dots, but you can see why this story keeps pulling people back in. In 2023, the team reportedly reprocessed the original radar data using newer imaging techniques and claimed the updated scans showed organized chambers and corridor-like spaces running throughout the structure. Not just random underground voids, but what they describe as a repeating internal pattern. Jones has also spoken about what he calls chemical imprints in the soil. He is not claiming they uncovered perfectly preserved wooden beams sitting underground waiting for tourists. The argument is more subtle than that. According to the team, they may be detecting the decomposed remnants of ancient organic material that altered the surrounding soil chemistry over thousands of years. And honestly, the soil findings are probably the part that made people stop laughing for a second. In September 2024, researchers collected 88 soil samples from 22 locations both inside and outside the formation. Those samples were reportedly analyzed by Australian soil scientist Bill Crabtree alongside Turkish geologist Dr. Mehmet Salih Bayraktutan. The results raised eyebrows. According to the research team, soil inside the formation contained nearly 3 times more organic matter than soil outside the structure's boundary. Potassium levels were also reportedly about 38% higher inside the formation. Researchers additionally documented altered clay-like material that they argue could form when organic material, like wood, slowly decomposes and chemically changes the surrounding ground over very long periods. Crabtree reportedly described the soil composition as markedly different from the surrounding mudflow terrain, and Jones took that interpretation even further. He has argued publicly that the soil chemistry is consistent with some kind of human-built structure existing there long ago, which is a much stronger claim than simply saying, "Hey, Aramisi, this dirt is unusual." Then there's the dating question. Some coverage of the project references preliminary analyses suggesting the organic material could date back somewhere between 3,500 and 5,000 years ago. That timeline overlaps broadly with the ancient Near Eastern Copper Age, and roughly falls into the era traditionally associated with the biblical flood narrative. The team has been careful to frame these as early findings needing additional verification, but naturally, believers immediately latched onto the timing, because, to them, this was yet another coincidence stacking on top of several others. And weirdly enough, part of this investigation apparently started because of grass. Jones said he first became suspicious after noticing vegetation inside the formation behaved differently from the surrounding area. During certain seasons, grass inside the outline reportedly turned more yellow and dull, while vegetation outside remained greener. That visual difference eventually pushed the team toward formal soil testing. Now, there's one more detail Ark supporters love bringing up: marine fossils. Researchers associated with the project have pointed to shells and coral-like materials reportedly found near the site, which sits around 6,500 feet above sea level. To believers, that sounds like flood evidence. But geologists are very quick to point out there is already a completely normal scientific explanation for marine material appearing at high elevation: tectonic uplift. Former seabeds can get pushed upward over millions of years through geological processes. It happens all over the world and is not considered unusual evidence by mainstream scientists. Still, when you stack everything together, the boat shape, the dimensions, the radar scans, the corridor claims, the soil chemistry, the possible dating range, you can understand why people keep circling back to this mountain like it's the world's oldest cold case. But here's the part the viral headlines usually skip. Outside researchers are not exactly rushing to declare this thing Noah's Ark. In fact, a lot of scientists remain deeply skeptical, and their reasons are actually pretty important. The skeptics have entered the chat. Let's be real with each other for a second, because the internet has absolutely run wild with this story, and there are some very important things getting left on the cutting room floor. First, let's talk about who's pushing back, because it's not just random haters. It's geologists, it's archaeologists, it's Turkish academics, it's people who've spent their careers studying exactly this kind of terrain. The mainstream geological consensus on the Durapanar Formation has been pretty consistent going back decades. In 1996, geologist Lawrence Collins, alongside David Fassold, who originally supported the arc theory before publicly changing his mind and rejecting it, published a paper concluding that the site is a natural geological formation. Collins described the structure as a syncline shaped by tectonic forces and landslide activity, with the angular features that excite arc researchers being nothing more than natural concentrations of minerals like limonite and magnetite, or ordinary fractures in the rock. And here's something that deserves a slow clap for irony. Both Lawrence Collins, a committed anti-creationist, and Andrew Snelling, a young Earth creationist, independently concluded it's a natural formation. Those two guys agree on almost nothing, but on this, totally aligned. That's either a remarkable coincidence or a very strong signal. Critics of the new research have pointed out several problems. One, a lot of what's being called new evidence is actually a reanalysis of old data. The GPR scans from 2019 were reprocessed in 2023. Skeptics argue that when you go looking for specific patterns in data, especially data you've already collected with a particular hypothesis in mind, you are extremely likely to find them. That's not a conspiracy accusation. That's just how human perception and data interpretation work. 2. Elevated organic matter and potassium in soil can have natural geological explanations. Ancient biological activity in the region, natural mineral deposits, even different vegetation histories can produce the kind of soil variation the team documented. The altered clay substances, also potentially explainable through natural mineral transformation processes. And the preliminary dating figures of 3,500 and 5,000 years. Skeptics note that without rigorous, independently verified carbon dating, with full documentation of sample chain of custody, early date estimates from a site with a clear confirmation bias risk should be treated as provisional at best, not as a timestamp on the arc. 3. No peer-reviewed publication of the full methods and raw data has happened yet. The findings have been released through press releases and media interviews and a symposium, not through the kind of independent scientific review that would let other experts pick apart the methodology and replicate the results. That's a big deal in science. The absence of peer review doesn't mean the research is wrong, but it means we genuinely can't know yet if it's right. 4. The marine fossils, scientists point to the movement of tectonic plates, which has been raising former seabeds to their current elevation over millions of years. That's not a fringe explanation. It's standard geology, and it applies to marine fossils found at altitude all over the world. And 5, maybe the most important point, Turkey has designated the site as protected territory, which significantly limits excavation options. Without the ability to actually dig in a controlled, documented way, any subsurface finding is going to remain in the realm of interesting but unconfirmed. Turkish academic voices have been particularly measured, noting that even if ceramic fragments or anomalous samples near the site indicate ancient human activity in the region, which they might, that alone cannot identify the structure as Noah's Ark. The region around Mount Ararat was inhabited by ancient peoples. Finding evidence of human presence nearby is not the same as finding the Ark. So we've got researchers with radar data and soil tests on one side, and geologists pointing to natural explanations on the other. The question everyone's really dancing around is, what would it actually take to settle this? Like, what's the version of this story that ends with a definitive answer? What would actually prove it? Or bury the idea for good? Here's the part both believers and skeptics tend to skip, because it involves something the internet hates: uncertainty. Even the researchers behind the Noah's Ark scans project admit they do not currently have definitive proof. Andrew Jones has said the goal right now is detection and documentation before any major excavation happens. The next possible step, core drilling, which would involve extracting deep cylindrical samples from inside the formation itself. And honestly, that would be a huge deal. Core samples could potentially reveal whether the material underground is natural rock, decomposed organic matter, or even processed wood. Those samples could then be independently dated using carbon dating and other scientific methods. But according to mainstream archaeologists and geologists, that alone still would not settle the debate. What scientists say would actually be needed is a fully controlled archaeological excavation with detailed documentation at every layer, overseen by independent experts not connected to the Noah's Ark team. They'd also want separate researchers to repeat the radar scans using their own equipment to see if they get the same results. And most importantly, everything would need to be openly published in peer-reviewed scientific journals, including the raw data, testing methods, and sample analysis, so experts in geology, archaeology, and materials science could properly evaluate the claims. None of that has happened yet. Part of the challenge is that the site is protected, and researchers still reportedly need approvals from Turkish authorities for more invasive testing. The Noah's Ark scans team says further surveys and possible core drilling are planned for 2025 and 2026. So technically, this story is still unfolding in real time. But there's also a reality check here. People have been making dramatic claims about this site for over 70 years. So far, none of them have produced evidence strong enough to convince the wider scientific community, which doesn't automatically make the current team wrong. It just means the burden of proof here is enormous. Before we wrap this up, let's zoom out. Because even if this specific formation turns out to be a completely natural geological structure, that doesn't mean there's nothing fascinating happening here. What does this story actually tell us about the intersection of history, faith, and science? The bigger picture, why this story keeps refusing to die. And here's the thing. Whether the Darupanar formation is actually Noah's Ark, a bizarre geological formation, or something in between, the reason this story refuses to die says a lot about us. Because the Noah's Ark story is not just a Bible story. Versions of a catastrophic flood appear across multiple ancient cultures. You see it in the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, which actually predates Genesis and contains some very familiar details. Flood stories also appear in ancient Greek mythology, Hindu traditions, and indigenous oral histories across the Americas. Different cultures, different continents, same terrifying basic idea. A flood so devastating, it nearly wiped humanity out. Now, does that automatically prove a worldwide flood happened? No, but it does suggest ancient people experienced catastrophic flooding events significant enough to survive thousands of years through storytelling. One theory researchers often point to is the Black Sea flood hypothesis, proposed in 1997 by geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman. The idea is that around 7,000 years ago, rising Mediterranean waters may have violently flooded the Black Sea region, displacing entire populations. That is not proof of Noah's Ark, but it is a reminder that myths sometimes contain fragments of real history buried under centuries of retelling. And honestly, that's what makes the Darupanar story fascinating, even if every radar scan eventually gets explained away. The bigger question isn't just whether there's a boat-shaped structure in Turkey. It's why so many ancient civilizations felt compelled to preserve stories about a flood that changed everything. And the truth is, we still don't fully know where things stand right now. So let's bring it home with a quick status check, because this story is actively developing. The Noah's Ark Scans project, working alongside Turkish researchers and academic partners, released its most comprehensive soil study results in April 2026, just weeks ago. The findings showed significant chemical differences between soil inside the Darupanar formation and the surrounding terrain, with the organic matter results being the headline stat: 3 times more organic material inside the boundary. The team has announced plans for more geophysical surveys and potential core drilling. No major excavation has been approved yet. The mainstream scientific community remains unconvinced, citing the need for peer-reviewed publication, independent replication, and actual excavation before any conclusions can be drawn. Several Turkish institutions are involved in ongoing study. Media coverage continues to range from genuinely careful reporting to wildly sensationalized headlines that absolutely do not reflect the cautious language of the researchers themselves, and the site remains protected, beautiful, deeply strange, and completely unresolved. Is it Noah's Ark? Nobody can honestly tell you yes right now. Could new data in the next year or two shift that conversation? Absolutely. Should you believe every headline that announces this thing has been discovered? Hard no. Look, I'm not going to stand here and tell you what to believe about Noah's Ark. That's not the point of this video, and honestly, that's a much bigger conversation than one YouTube script can hold. What I will tell you is this: the Darupanar story is a genuinely fascinating collision of ancient history, modern technology, religious belief, and scientific skepticism, and it's happening right now, in real time. The researchers are still out there. The scans are still being analyzed. The soil results are fresh, and the next round of testing is supposedly coming in 2026. So here's what I want you to do. If you found this interesting, if this is the kind of deep dive into history, archaeology, and unexplained mysteries that you actually want to see more of, hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel is exactly where we do this. Every week, drop in the comments. Do you think the Darupanar Formation is Noah's Ark, a natural geological formation, or something else entirely? I genuinely want to know where you're landing on this. The debate in the comments brings me pure joy. And if you want to go deeper on ancient flood myths, mysterious archaeological sites, or the science of what we do and don't know about early human civilization, hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. We're just getting started.